I want to ask you, Patrick. We see Tadej Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard at the start line. Let's start comparing teams here, because do we feel like both teams have a similar setup in terms of roles for their riders?
Well, no. No, I think they're actually very different in both composition and roles. And we'll start with UAE. We start with the heavy favorite, Tadej Pogačar. The odds are Pogačar's $1.40, I think. GC favorite, $1.36 rather. Vingegaard's $3.40. So it's really with Remco at $10. It's between those three is what the market's saying. We'll get to Broe in a second, but Pogačar's the more than odds-on favorite at $1.36. That's an implied probability of 70% plus to win the race. His team, though, is for that reason all around Pogačar. You want to win stages? You win it with Pogačar. You want to keep a rider safe? 7 riders committed to keeping Tadej Pogačar safe. Climbing-wise, the strongest team in the race, most likely, if Adam Yates is in good shape. Poggy, of course, needs no introduction. Almeida just won 3 consecutive World Tour one-week races. He came 4th in the Tour last year, 3rd in the Giro in 23. Narvaez, puncher, classicsy type guy. Pollitt, climbing rouleur. Sivakov, climbing rouleur. Soler, climbing rouleur. Tim Wellens, the classics support, just won Belgian national champs yesterday. I think maybe the most important rider for Pogačar in the whole race, Tim Wellens. Adam Yates is the pure climbing support. So there's no... Like, Pollitt is not a Feeney. It's not the same rider. So to me, it's more climbing focused, and this is a team that's can just destroy some of those long mountain stages in the 2nd and 3rd week.
I think so too, but then you pointed at it. It's not necessarily an Affini in Nils Pollitt, because we said this during our Milano-Sanremo recap and preview that Pollitt is not necessarily a godlike when it comes to positioning. He's a good ruler, don't get me wrong. He's a great rider, but that specific role, he hasn't necessarily mastered, and we've seen that quite a few times. It's just not him based on what we've seen so far. So then my question on top of that is, okay, positioning-wise, I expect Visma Leasebike to be better when it comes to positioning Jonas for every small hill in week 1. If I look at the UAE team, and then the Visma team being Vingegaard, obvious course as the GC leader, Affini being that positioning man, Tish Benoit and Victor Kampenaerts. Kampenaerts also present for positioning, I would argue. Jorgensen, Kuss, Yates, Van Aert. This is a strong team. We'll go into the in-depth roles of Visma Leasebike in a second, but I'm just trying to build my point here that I think it's very possible that Pogačar might end up being, positioning-wise, the 9th rider on Visma Leasebike during the first week of this Tour de France.
It really depends on Narvaez and Wellens. So, yeah, as I said, Wellens is in great shape, but he can't do it all himself. Sivakov was quite good in the Dauphiné at it, actually. And, but yeah.
But not perfect either. The first stage didn't work.
I think in reality, one of Pollitt or Soler, probably based on his Dauphiné shape, Soler should be out. And then for this first week, you want Ivo Oliveira or Florian Vermeersch. But Poggy can position himself better than Vingegaard. He can solve problems himself better than Vingegaard. Stage 1 Dauphiné, he was isolated. He still won the stage. He's always there in crosswinds. The bigger issue, Benji, is what if something does go wrong? Does he have the team to solve it? Then the horsepower on the flat. Maybe, maybe not. But in the mountains, Almeida could be the 3rd best climber in this race ahead of Remco. And then I don't even think, like, the mountain hierarchy will be Pollitt pulling, like controlling with Soler. Then you have Sivakov to do longer climbs. And then you have like Wellens and Narvaez if they can do their explosive lead out like on Combloux and even Murder Britannia, or even Adam Yates did the San Luca lead out. They have really good guys for those 5-minute climbs or even 2-minute climbs. So we say they maybe miss a little bit of horsepower, but actually in terms of doing a 2-minute lead out on a steep climb, Wellens and Narvaez might be and better than what Visma have, also because they're all dedicated to one person, one goal.
Are we saying that Visma Leasebike is not dedicated to one goal? because we look at those riders again. Jonas Vingegaard being the GC leader. Then we've got Sepp Kuss, Jorgensen, and Simon Yates, which were kind of, some of those riders were played out as a secondary GC rider at the Dauphiné, together with Ben Tollett as well. So, like, are we saying that we see a multi-leader strategy brewing here? Because I don't see the possibility for Jorgensen, Kuss, and Simon Yates to endanger Pogačar in any way in this Grand Tour.
And that's the thing, because they have, maybe I'm wrong in that UAE would also just do that with Almeida. I think Almeida, the idea is he will get to ride for his own GC as long as possible, and that it's not that he's going to throw away his own GC to keep him happy. I think week one's tough for him, but yeah, on the point of then, at Visma, Simon Yates just won the Giro though.
Yeah, but the Giro is built different than the Tour de France for me.
It is indeed.
The consistency across 3 weeks in this Tour de France after having done a Giro is also a question. And that's not just a question that is brought up with Simon Yates. Yes, Sepp Kuss has been able to do 3 Grand Tours, but I'm looking at Mr. Wout van Aert as well, where he did the cobbles, then the Giro, and then the Tour de France. And I'm then wondering, are we going to see the best Wout van Aert at this Tour de France? You'd hope so. And what is the best Wout van Aert in 2025? Is that the level we saw at the Vuelta, for example? Is that the level we saw on Colle del Finestre? Can he ever get back to 2022 Wout van Aert? Or was Colle del Finestre Wout level the same as 2022 Wout van Aert? We're always comparing the peaks of Wout van Aert together with each other, but what is a realistic level we can expect from Wout van Aert at this Tour de France is a question that has actually been in my mind for the last week, and I think he's going to be good, otherwise he probably wouldn't be at the start line. Except for the sickness.
He just had to pull out of Belgian Championships due to some sickness. Will he be in the 2022 shape? Maybe not, relative to especially Van der Poel, who Van der Poel in Dauphiné looked incredibly sharp. So I would still say if there's a steep ramp, you'd expect Van der Poel to punch away on it. But will he be good? Yeah. Affini also did the Giro and is backing up from the cobbles. So Visma bring 3 out of the Giro. UAE only 1. They bring Adam Yates out of the Giro. And their team, as I said, is largely unchanged from last year. Just Ayuso out, Narvaez in. I'd say that is probably an upgrade on what Ayuso did last year. And then Visma, Visma's is way different. Last year had Bard Lemon, Jan Tratnik, and can't even remember who else. But now that
they crashed half the season.
They cobbled it together like in the week before. They just put some. So, Kuss got COVID and he was out. And so they have 2 better climbers, Kuss and Simon Yates, than last year. And Affini, it is a downgrade on peak Christophe Laporte. And Campenaerts is in for Tratnik, which is probably an upgrade.
I do want to mention something more in this discussion between UAE and Visma Leasebike. Pogačar and Vingegaard. Can we talk about their level for a second here? Because Pogačar, when it comes to his climbing, the 2024 Tour de France, that's right now the level I expect from Tadej Pogačar, the Plateau de Bay level, the Isola 2000 level in this Tour de France. Then I look at Jonas Vingegaard. I haven't seen that level. I stated it before. So how can Visma Leasebike then hurt UAE Team Emirates? And there, obviously, as someone that's invested in the Tour de France, that's something that's been in my mind the last 2 weeks, and trying to figure out ways where have we seen any weakness from UAE in the last half a year, for example, the last year, which from Tadej Pogačar himself, not necessarily. So it's more looking at UAE, can Visma Leasebike as a whole hurt UAE as a whole? And then I'm thinking positioning before the small climbs in week 1. That's something where you want to look at. That's a possibility, because it's possible that UAE's positioning for Pogačar doesn't get it all right. Is it possible that Pogačar himself saves it if his position by his team is not perfect? Yes, he's done it a million times before. But that's an area where I'd expect Visma to be better than UAE. Is that going to be enough to take minutes on Pogačar and win the Tour de France? Not necessarily. But are there other ways we see Vingegaard being able to hurt Pogačar based on what we've seen in the last year?
I mean, not really. Not really. I mean, if Yeah, but if a guy rides a mountaintop finish 1 minute faster than you, like at the end of the day, it's a pretty straightforward sport in terms of GC. So a lot can happen in the stages before, like you just mentioned, all those things. But this UAE team, Benji, it ain't the bullshit they were trotting out in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
That's why we were so hard on Jumbo-Visma, because they were up against the ghost of Fabio Aru, two sprinters, and like David de la Cruz riding his own GC, and they didn't do anything. This UAE team is stacked.
It is. And it is stacked enough, in my opinion, because then I look at another option. Okay, how did Sepp Kuss win La Vuelta 2023? He did so by on a medium mountain stage, which looks a lot like a stage 10 in this Tour de France, for example. Try and go into a breakaway, slip into a breakaway with one of their secondary GC riders and try and put pressure on UAE Team Emirates. But that's a possible tactic that could put UAE in stress. But I have not necessarily seen UAE at the Tour de France make a mistake so gravely on a stage like that for that to be able to work against them.
And that's the point, because the Giro, that clusterfuck, that doesn't happen with Pogačar because he's the DS on the road. Like, he is aware of what's happening. He's like, okay, this could be crosswinds here, or this is a tricky moment, or we should go here, we should go easy, or let that break go. He is doing it. That being said, Visma have to apply pressure, Benji. If you don't apply pressure, if you don't try things, then if you just walk through every mountain stage, most likely Pogačar is just going to win. So,
and that exactly brings me to the point of over the last month, we've heard the likes of Richard Blugge mentioning, okay, like the strategy that worked in 2022 and 2023 was throughout the 3 weeks, put pressure on Tadej Pogačar, and then in doing so, potentially building up fatigue, and then it pays off on a massive stage where they also try to build up additional fatigue, stuff like that. But my initial reaction is then, okay, well, based on 2024 Tour de France, that won't work. But on the other side, I look at it and, okay, the only position, the only point at the Tour de France 2024 where Pogačar was a bit in trouble, where Pogačar struggled a little bit, was not necessarily super fatigue, but it was a stage where it opened up early. In doing so, Pogačar seemingly fueled incorrectly or not enough on the medium mountain stage to Puy-Mari last year. And in that stage, Vingegaard ends up beating him in a sprint. So that same strategy of doing the fatigue might accidentally lead to Pogačar not feeling enough. Or do you think they've got a dedicated person in the car now to say, Pogi, it's time to eat your fucking meal, dude?
Well, no, obviously, you watch every race with Pogačar in the Dauphiné, and they're pouring water bottles over him. It depends on the temperature at the Tour de France.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that was a feeding issue on stage 11. I mean, he still did like 6.8 watts per kilo for 12 minutes. It wasn't like a Grenoble level crack, but it also, it's the only time, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the only time in the last 18 months anybody has done a climb faster than Pogačar.
In a relevant race, yes. I don't know if he rode a fucking Plouet or something.
Probably there he went quicker too. Probably there. So that, what sort of scenario could that be? Because that's actually not Col de la Loze, Benji. Yep. That's some other stage during this race. But it's you don't know unless you try, and that's clearly Visma are going to try to win with Vingegaard. He doesn't care about coming second or third. But then you still see Van Aert is there as a bit of a backup to... it's not like he won't go for stages either. Yeah.
How much do we expect the freedom for Wout van Aert to be? Because I do see opportunities in week one. Those hilly parcours where you've got Muur de Bretagne, etc. as maybe one of the longer climbs of the bunch. But my scare is that I consider Mathieu van der Poel going into this Tour de France a lot better than Wout van Aert, to the point that I question whether Wout van Aert in the first place even has a chance for those stages. It's not impossible. He has a chance, but I don't see him competitive versus Mathieu van der Poel in the 1v1 for those stages.
No, and there's Thibaut Naesen. I mean, he's also the second coming of Jesus Christ from your nation. So, No, but all jokes aside, like, we'll get to Naesen the punchers as well, but it's not a fait accompli that you just beat him either, even if Van der Poel does have a bad day. So, or Pogačar, he can punch pretty well from what I've seen. So, to round off this discussion of UAE versus Visma, Benji, I would say both basically the strongest teams they could possibly bring outside of, in theory, Laporte. And maybe I would put in a Vermeersch or Ivo Oliveira, but that's, I think, nitpicking.
Matthew Brennan.
Yeah, Matthew Brennan, of course. I mean, yes, bring him. But really, this is the best teams. A little bit, Visma's more weighted on the heavier rouleurs. UAE's more weighted on the climbing rouleurs. I'm talking like 65, 70 kilo guys like Sivakov, Soler. But they're strong teams and no obvious weaknesses to me. And indeed, I spoke with Scott Roy, Cervelo's engineering manager, about the new S5, which you may have seen in the Criterium de Dauphiné. And this new S5 is launching on July 8th. We spoke with him beforehand to get a teaser of what's actually different about the bike. Maybe Van Aert on this new S5, Benji, it'll change your opinion on whether he will win on the Tour de Bretagne or on a punchy finish. But we bleeped out how many watts faster the new bike is. The audience can find out on July 8th, but yeah, Benji can guess. But now we'll go to this ad with Scott Roy.